So today I'm going to show you these crochet buttons which finish off the spots and stripes blanket. I've got this precariously balanced on my lap, which is a bit silly. I should be upstairs in the studio where there's a nice big white table to work on, but I'm being lazy today. So it's a wee bit difficult to do this looking through the lens of the camera phone, but never mind. Right, so you have made a nice big pile of these little crochet buttons, haven't you? All 130 something of them. And the blanket has areas where I'm going to put them. As you can see, I'm putting them in where the squares join at the corners, and I just think it makes a nice little textured feature for the blanket. I've got a plan on the pattern of where each colour goes, but really there's 11 colours. You can ring the changes whichever way you like. The kind of rule I followed was I would look at the 4 squares that that this was going to go in the corner, and I would choose a colour which didn't appear in any of the 4 squares. That seems quite simple. It was a little bit of trial and error, playing around to get a nice balance, but it works out quite easily, really. Anyway, once I had laid them all out, I put a stitch marker in each one to hold it in place, and now it's time to sew them on. Now, if you have been good, you will have made your button, which is the centre, simply the centre of one of the circles, and you will have sewn in nice and tightly the starting end of the yarn, and you sew it in on the right side of the button. So you work it in and pull it really tightly and give it a double stitch and finish off. And the reason it's on the right side of the button is because I'm using the wrong side to attach it, so that the wrong side is uppermost. The reason being is that, as you can see, it forms a sort of a tiny little sort of raised edge, which some people might quite like. I mean, you might choose to do it that way, I don't mind. But I quite like it because on the reverse side, it's slightly more concave. Anyway, it forms more of a rounded top, to a domed top. So you will have finished off your middle one, and as I said earlier on, you want to keep the end yarn quite long, so that this is what we use to sew it to the blanket. So that's it on my nice blunt tapestry needle. And what I do is, it's on my lap, and what I do is I make sure that this end is kind of like about 5 o'clock on here, if you know what I mean. It's down in the bottom right hand section of the circle. And if you try and line up this centre hole with the join in the blanket, so that gets it in the right place, just by sight more than anything else. And now you just need to zip round, it doesn't take long, just pick up a little bit of the blanket and come through further along on the button, go back into the blanket just over, straight down, so your stitch is quite small. You're not doing a big long stitch, you're doing a nice small stitch. This is called stab stitch. So you go in and come back through on the button, and again in, pick up and back through, and you're going to just work around. Now this is just taking seconds really, isn't it? It doesn't take long to do, and with the yarn the stitch very conveniently disappears, and it's quite invisible really. So you work round. Now you can turn the blanket if you're wanting to work back, but that's why I started this down here. You don't have too much of an area where you're having to work back on yourself. So I just keep going. Actually, I think there's part of my jeans underneath getting picked up. I can feel it. And this will probably be about the last stitch. And it's just going to go in and come through, which is pretty much where we started. And then into the back, because we're going to finish off the button on the back. And you can see there's really not much showing on the back, so it's really quite invisible really. And I just do a nice double stitch, put it through the loop to help to anchor it, and that's the button. Clip it nice and short, and that's the pink button.